Welcome to the Very Liberal podcast with me, Lembit Opik,
And me, Mark Oaten.
where we take a look from a liberal perspective at things happening in the UK and beyond. And this week, we'll be looking at hatred in politics and what that means in America.
And also, if we look at the far-right movement in France and we look at some of the statements by some of the Conservative leadership candidates, are they ratcheting up that anti-negative feeling in politics?
And we'll add on security for MPs. It's a natural follow-on given the very dramatic events you've doubtless seen happening to Donald Trump in the United States. But let's start with hatred in politics. Why do you hate me?
Lembit, I don't hate, I love you.
That's assault. Did you see? That's assault. That was unwelcome advance.
You loved it. And
No, we can stop the recording. That's all the evidence I needed.
It reminds me, actually, when I stood for an election first time, and I just won by 2 votes, and a guy stood against me, and he was called a literal Democrat.
Oh, yes.
And at about 4 a.m. in the morning, it became clear to me this literal Democrat had probably cost me the seat. And I did get a little bit worked up, and I did say,
No
I
way.
did that. And the police investigated it. The police investigated it, and the chief constable said, look, we've looked into this and we've decided not to press charges. But next time you try and strangle somebody, do not do it when it's live streamed on ITV and BBC. It's a very bad idea.
How many votes did the literal Democrat get?
Oh, he got 600 votes.
Oh, that would have made the difference.
That would have made it. Yeah, yeah.
I actually had to go on to question time when you had the by-election, which had to have and your majority went up from 2 to 21,553. Do you remember that number?
Well, I can't remember the number
That's
because
the actual number.
I'm dyslexic. I can't remember. I know it was more than 2 though.
It was definitely more than 2. That was a sweet moment.
But you know, we talk about hatred in politics, and yes, I did lose my temper there. But generally speaking, we have a history in this country of democracy being done peacefully.
Yeah.
We've just seen, for example, the transfer of power between a Conservative and Labour government carry on peacefully.
Well, from a Conservative to a Conservative government,
okay,
really.
Maybe. But the events in America and the way in which the presidential election, well, the last one ended badly with the violence around Washington. And unfortunately, the recent events suggest that it could be just as toxic this time around.
Yeah, let's put this in context. You will have seen fairly recently that Donald Trump was actually shot through the ear. He was basically within 3 centimeters of death.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, it was all fixed by Trump himself to get this iconic picture. There's no way. How can you possibly do that? It's definite, in my view, that he got shot. And he got shot by somebody who wasn't on his team.
And I hope it's a turning point in the way in which the presidential election takes place. If you look at the first debate between Trump and Biden, it was childish, it was hostile, it was negative. They were attacking each other. They were, both of them, just blatantly lying at each other. Now, is this the wake-up call that American politics needed? Thankfully, that Trump survives. Biden has come out saying, look, this was terrible. Do you think this will change the narrative in the way in which they actually debate?
Yeah,
the tone will change for the better.
You definitely will change the narrative, but in a very ironic way. I'm willing to guess that the person who did the shooting probably didn't want Donald Trump to be the president. That horrible scum who's dead now, and I don't care what his motives were, he guarantees Trump's victory because Trump got that, I think, unplanned, iconic picture of his hand in the air, and then he goes, fight, 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 which I think is probably a reference to the fight or flight, and that makes him unbustable. So he and whoever else was involved in that, I'll come to that in a minute, achieved the opposite effect. In terms of the change in tone, publicly, I think Joe Biden now has had to be respectful, and in a way, he's almost had to endorse Donald Trump in an ironic way. But the issue here is the hate's still there. And I think what we saw was the desperation some people have to stop Donald Trump from winning. And I don't think that that person was acting alone.
But the hatred, where does it come from? Does it come from the public in the first place through frustration at what's happening to their healthcare, to their country? Or is it incited by the politicians in the first place? And there's no doubt in my mind that Trump over the years has wanted to create a bandwagon of hatred, which he can then capitalize in some way. And he wants to be a negative force. He's not coming out campaigning in a positive way. It's all very negative. So are we seeing our politicians increasingly inciting hatred as a way of winning votes? If you know, we'll come on to France in a moment, but there it seems to me that Le Pen and the far right definitely want to work up that negative, and they feel it will benefit them. To some extent, reform in this election, wanting to talk about the negatives over immigration because they knew it would benefit them.
You're such a namby-pamby liberal, no offense.
I'm not rising to it.
I just don't, but he nearly did. The point is, I just don't agree. I think that you've swallowed the establishment line. Donald Trump says things which are sarcastic. I give myself an A+. I've got a very high IQ. That's not your fault. You could find that intimidating, but that's why I got to be the president.
That's very good.
I practice it a lot.
Okay. Well, in the mirror.
You never see me and him in a room at the same time. That's what I'll say. So he says these things. And if you think about it like your friend in a pub, you think this is really quite funny. He is smart. He's a great business person. He's learned a lot about politics.
He also wants to build a wall to keep Mexicans out. And he uses that rhetoric to keep people out.
Who continued the wall? Give you a clue.
But it's
the current president, Joe Biden. He carried on the wall he said was wrong for Biden to build, for Trump to build.
Do you accept that from some politicians there is a language which builds up actions which are negative? For example, after he lost that election, Trump held that rally in Washington. Many people have said that that was an incitement for the riots that took place. You've got to accept that.
I don't think it was an incitement. He could.
I mean, hasn't he been found guilty in a couple of courts on that?
You asked my opinion. I wasn't part of the jury. I'm not going to accept. Yeah, they say Assange is guilty.
So you don't accept jury decisions?
I don't accept it when they say Assange is guilty of the offence of spilling the beans on nefarious activity by big state. And I don't accept, in my opinion, had I been a juror, I don't expect that Donald Trump has personally been found guilty. I don't think he's been found guilty in a court of inciting hatred.
You saw the speech that he made.
It was about you said he's been found guilty
marching on to Washington.
Okay, so he's responsible for people taking his position.
Yes, he is responsible
to the extent of barging into Capitol Hill.
With public office comes a set of responsibilities. You have to be careful and cautious about the language that you use because it will be interpreted, unfortunately,
by stupid people. I say by the stupid electorate.
Well, you have to be responsible as a leader, and I argue that Trump has not been responsible.
So let's think about this. We're going off the hate point for a little bit.
It's about hate because he's inciting people to hate.
I don't hate a president of the United States who didn't start a single war, but shut quite a lot of trouble down. He didn't kill over 1 million Iraqis like Bush and Blair did. That's hate of people. If you want to start measuring the toll in lives, my view is that hate is used as a weapon, and that's the way our argument proves it. People say Trump is a hate-making figure. I'm saying the other side are involved in hate. I would say he was shot by some pointless person who I won't name because I will never give him any credit, never give him any historical marker on what I do. But I think that the hate came from other people.
Well, let's look at Le Pen as a controversial figure. Again, France, a country which has been torn apart with division and arguments. Surprise first round election where the right Le Pen party topped the poll. And then that period they have in French politics is quite interesting for a reflection before the second runoff. I was in Nice, south of France, for the second runoff.
Oh, this whole story is just so you can name drop. You can afford to go to Nice for a few days.
Hang on a minute. Where are you going tomorrow?
None of your business. Carry on.
Exactly. Greece, and it's far more expensive than Nice. But my point is that there was you could see a tension. You could see that, and I believe that Le Pen has not sought to diffuse tensions around immigration, but has sought not to find solutions, but has sought to wind people up and to create this hostile environment. And that cannot be good for politics or individual communities to create that atmosphere.
We're going to fall out because I don't agree. I think Le Pen obviously captured the popular mood. In the last podcast we did, we were talking about the fact that the Labour Party won a majority in the UK.
Well,
they got a lower percentage of the poll than Le Pen. So why do you accept the legitimacy of the British government, but then say that Le Pen's National Rally Party hasn't got the same legitimacy? It's not more.
Because it didn't. Because in the end, the forces of good and moderation won on the second round in the French election.
Loaded value judgments.
They are valued. They're my value judgments.
Well, don't make them. Don't make them.
And you have different value judgments.
You know,
I do not like parties which seek to divide nations and countries and put communities against each other just so they can try and come to power. And that is what Le Pen has done.
No, it's not. Okay, so you say that about Macron. Let's remember the guy who's intimating that he wouldn't mind an escalation of the trouble in Ukraine. Or Le Pen, who would like a de-escalation of that, who wants to rein in the insane power centralized in Brussels, which is basically lording it over 27 countries. I would say Le Pen speaks for, well, at least I think it was originally 37.5% of the electorate. And the hate comes from two parties which didn't like each other coming together to stop Le Pen from coming in and pretty much guaranteeing she's going to be the next president of France, by the way.
This is a liberal podcast, so we talk, I hope.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm completely wrong.
I hope we talk.
Mark's right. I'm wrong.
No, we talk from a liberal perspective. At least I try to do that. And sometimes being a liberal means that you don't say the popular thing. You don't seek out to actually get the 60% or the 70% of the electorate. You speak up for what you believe in and the values that you like and support. And so I would much rather take on those majorities just because you turn around and say that Le Pen's party got all these votes and was popular.
Just because they won the poll.
It doesn't mean
mere bagatelle.
Doesn't mean to say that there shouldn't be a strong liberal voice in France and elsewhere arguing against those things.
Change the subject here. Right. I'm also a Democrat. Now, I would say, and this is, I think is unarguable, the Le Pen party got a higher percentage of the vote in the first round of that French election than the Labour Party did in Britain. They got 412 seats here. Even the last time, neither of us challenged the legitimacy under our system of the Labour Party winning. But if all the other parties had ganged up and had just one candidate in each seat, then by definition, the Labour Party wouldn't have won. And that's what you're advocating.
No, it's not what I'm advocating. The Democrat in me agrees, that's right. But the Democrat in me also defends absolutely my right to say that I don't agree with them and there should be a strong liberal voice fighting and arguing against these things. I remember when they wanted to introduce ID cards in this country, a very, very popular policy. It was the Liberal Democrats that stood out against that when all the polls showed it was popular. Occasionally, in politics, you have to stand up for what you believe in, even if it's not popular. And that's what I'm arguing.
Okay, I agree with you on ID cards. I think it's a terrible idea. It's I'm totally aligned with that because I don't want to give the state any more power than we have to. But when it comes to what you're saying about Le Pen and the National Rally, I think you're being a patronizing git.
Let me give you another example of what I'm talking about. So I will defend forever the right of Suella Braverman to go to America to speak to a conservative think tank and to make remarks which were clearly anti-LGBT and to talk about the pride flag flying over buildings as if those buildings had been captured. I will defend forever her right to say that. But I absolutely disagree with it. And I think it's dangerous talk. We've gone so far in this country to make sure that we speak up for minorities and to her to undermine in this way is, again, another example of a politician using issues in a negative way to try and win votes. The votes she's trying to win are the votes to become the next leader of the Conservative Party. I see it as another example of that.
Oh, would you stop her?
No,
in this country?
I defend her right to do it, but I'm saying it's wrong.
All right.
It's dangerous that politicians are working up people on these issues in a negative way.
Back to the same argument. I would say what you're telling me about Braverman and what you're telling me about Le Pen, the National Rally right wing group in France, is the same thing. That you're worried that the public is so dense that they can't make up sensible decisions for themselves. Now, I think that we've got a poor government. I think we're going to really suffer for 5 years. But they won the election. Labour Party's in charge, and it's a legitimate result. I'd say the same for Le Pen. I would actually say the same for Braverman. If she gets to be leader of the Conservative Party, which I don't know if she's going to or not, then that's the Conservative Party's right. I don't have to vote for the Conservative Party, but I certainly don't resent people who I know who do, because actually one of the problems I see, and maybe where the hate comes from, is this forced conformity. If somebody for religious reasons actually thinks that homosexual activity is wrong, I think they got the right to say that. And I got the right to debate it, and you got the right to debate it. But we're getting to a situation now where cancel culture is telling people who to hate, and that's from intolerance. And I think as a liberal, you should not be supporting that.
As I said, I will defend absolutely the right of other individuals to take an opposing view, but there comes a responsibility in mainstream politics that you don't incite individuals and try and put one community against another.
But that's illegal anyway. It's illegal.
Well, I would argue that her comments are trying to persuade people that being gay is a negative
She's
thing.
not saying attack gay people, is she?
Well, it starts with these kind of
Oh,
underlying messages that the gay individuals are trying to capture the community by putting a flag up.
A lot of people feel very intimidated when they go around
By a
London
pink flag, sorry, a rainbow
by
flag.
the relentless appearance of rainbow colours and everything else.
You possibly feel intimidated that you should celebrate it. It's completely harmless.
Right. And there's the debate that you're trying to stop. The people who feel a different way should have the right to express it. They might have strong religious beliefs, for example. And those people, I'm worried, you infer might have to be cancelled in case they incite hate. Well, I can say that the Green Party incites hate against car drivers who've got petrol and diesel engines, so the Green Party should be cancelled.
I don't want anyone cancelled, but I want people to be responsible, and I want a democracy.
What's the difference?
There is a huge difference. There's a huge difference about the rhetoric and the tone of how you discuss and debate.
So you're going to have a guidebook about tone. You're beginning to sound like the Scottish National Party who introduced hate speech crimes in Scotland in your own house.
Because unfortunately, we live in a society today where on social media, for example, some of the remarks, some of the comments that can be made are leading to real distress for individuals.
This is the slippery slope when liberals like you pretend to be liberal, but then don't like something because they cause offense. And they cause offense, and you're allowed to cause offense in a free society.
I'm not a nanny state. I am not a nanny.
You sound like one now.
But on these issues, I believe there's a responsibility because
it affects you.
No, not because it affects me. Because we've seen, sadly, let's take for example, and it's a very live issue, the outrageous attacks on members of parliament, not just physical but actual abuse on social media. It's causing a lot of good people who want to go into politics to walk away from it. It is a real concern. Some of the new MPs all setting up offices now. One of the first things they have to look at is security issues around their offices. That comes from intolerance. That comes from allowing people to be able to get away with saying things which are so unacceptable. We have to draw a line somewhere.
It comes from the opposite. It comes from saying to people, you have the right to be outraged by this person's minority beliefs or beliefs which are different to yours. If you're so angry, why don't you go and show them what you think by gluing your hands to the road, causing disruption like Just Stop Oil, or by going and screaming or throwing things at someone like Nigel Farage. The hate comes from the intolerance from woke. It's the woke that's causing this. This didn't happen so much whenever you and I were members of parliament. It's happening now because Black Lives Matter goes and encourages rage. Just Stop Oil says it encourages rage. You're called a murderer if you fly in a plane.
Do you believe it's right that, as happened to me, that constituents said that they wanted me dead because I was supporting a bill as a private member's bill for inter-country adoption so that people in this country could adopt children from another country? I had endless death threats over that issue. Now, do you defend the right of those individuals to say they wanted to kill my children, kill me? Do you defend?
No, that's already illegal. That's already illegal, not by political law, especially for MPs, but just by any law. If I threatened you, regardless of the fact I'm a member of the public, if I do a death threat to you, then I'm committing a criminal offence.
But the political rhetoric is getting so hot and so aggressive that he's almost giving permission for individuals to be able to make those kind of statements.
And here I agree with you, but you said it exactly right. The political rhetoric is causing this, but part of the political rhetoric is saying you can mistreat people who don't agree with your particular worldview. Let's say with LGBT, you get cancelled if you question that. All kinds of religious people are intimidated because they can't express their views you wouldn't agree with, but express their views. With the green agenda, same thing. You get hated if you dare to point out that carbon dioxide produced by human beings can't possibly do the climate damage which is being attributed to it. So the hate's coming from the politicians, giving the general public the impression that it's okay to hate. That's the irony. That's why I'm so agitated. The woke agenda does anything except create a truly tolerant society.
We needed to redress the balance. I don't like the woke agenda, but I do understand that we needed to change things, that language, that tolerance, that things that people thought were acceptable before had to move on, they had to change. Has it gone too far in the other direction? I think probably the argument is yes, that it has. But you cannot deny that as a society, we should be becoming more tolerant, more aware of people having different views and opinions, and allowing them to have those opinions. As liberals, we want that, but in a way which is respectful.
Yeah,
and that's my concern, is that the Trumps, the Le Pens, the Suella Bravermans, to wrap it all up, do not do that in a respectful way. They seek to create the division rather than seeking to bring people together.
And I'm saying, when you have the Eurovision Song Contest, which we've discussed previously, as essentially a festival of sexual innuendo and things I actually stopped my children from watching, then we've got a chasm in our society where it's just not on to stop those kinds of things from being family acceptable.
And now you're being the nanny state.
Because I don't want my child to see a sex act performed on television because
it's something you don't like. So now
yes, I don't want my 7-year-old to see a simulated sex act on a program that used to be a family show.
But there's things I don't like seeing as well, but I will defend the right for people to see them. But we draw the line, I say, at some of the intolerance that we've seen in America and France. There has to be a line drawn. Where we draw it is perhaps for a discussion in a future podcast.
Yeah, and I'm saying the law already draws that line. And the one point we haven't investigated and we haven't got time to do today is the extent to which that hate is deep state. The extent to, and I'll leave it like this, the extent to which it wasn't the lone wolf on the roof that hated Trump. It was the people who let that happen. Cliffhanger. I got others, maybe even get a witness on that one coming in. But the one area, I suppose I don't want to fall out with you completely, where I agree, there has to be a line, but you and I draw the line in different places.
And that's democracy.
That's all I'm willing to do today with this man here on the Very Liberal podcast. Do join us again. And you've seen it twice now. Here's where you can express your support for me, or perhaps for Mark, at our website. We'll be back again, hopefully with the same energy. And hopefully that's prompted you to think about things. Tell us what you do think at our site. I'm Lembit Opik.
I'm Mark Oaten.
This was the Very Liberal podcast. See you soon.